It's a good time, I think, between Thanksgiving and the start of a new year, a period of goodwill, gratitude, and thanks, for me to share an odd little project I once did back before I became a full-time geezer. So let me take you back some 17 years ago to Medina, Ohio. Our telephone rang. My wife answered it and handed it to me saying, "I think it might be a telemarketer. He stumbled over your name." So as I took the phone from her, I mentally rehearsed a clever comment that would end the conversation quickly but gently. The voice came on the line and said, "This is Mike Wallace from 60 Minutes. Instantly, I revised my planned response to a devilishly clever, "Oh yeah? And this is Donald Duck from the Disney Channel." But fortunately, before I could utter that gem, something about the voice, it was familiar, caused me to say instead, "Golly, the real Mike Wallace." I'm lightning quick. And the voice laughed and said, "Yes, the real Mike Wallace." Why was Mike Wallace calling me? To thank me. To thank me for a thank you note I had written him several weeks earlier. What he didn't know was that he was part of a year-long thank you note project. I woke up one morning and, for reasons that were then unclear, wondered if I could write a thank you note a day for a whole year. It turns out I could. I did. I wrote 365 consecutive thank you notes. They fell into 4 categories. First were thank yous that I had to write, the kind of note that most people in a civilized society write in response to a kindness, a gift, a thoughtfulness. I probably shouldn't have included them in the project because I would have written those letters anyway, but I did. And I'll come back to this category in a bit, even though it doesn't really fit the spirit of my project. The second category were thank yous to celebrities such as Mike Wallace. Not gushing fan mail. In fact, in almost every case, the thank you dealt with some other aspect of their lives. Paul Newman, for example, not for his stardom and blue eyes, but for his charity, the Hole in the Wall gang, and for having the good sense to marry and stay married to Joanne Woodward. Third were thank you notes to people in the news, but not celebrities, not people I knew, but people who had done something remarkable in my eyes and who I thought deserved acknowledgement for their contribution. The inner city Washington, D.C. math teacher who instilled in some 8th grade young black girls a love for chess and developed with them a level of skill such that they dominated the cushy suburban school chess teams in the area tournaments. The final category, my favorite, were thank yous to people I knew personally, but for whom there was no specific reason to write a thank you, because these notes represented thanks for a lifetime of gifts to me, or something that had happened many years ago that I now realize I'd never properly acknowledged. Now, these are tricky to write, without the recipient thinking that you're on your deathbed, trying to get right with the world in your final moments, or that you're living in a box under a bridge somewhere looking for a handout. But clearly, these were the most rewarding, and as it turns out, the best, and a fully sufficient justification for the whole project. It gave me a reason to write a thank you that I would not have otherwise written, at least not now. I'll come back to that in a moment. But first, a little bit more of a comment on the first category, the notes that polite society suggests you must write. Well, I'm well aware that many, some in this room perhaps, feel that thank yous are a waste of time. We don't do that anymore. Cursive writing is out, pen and paper is out. Well, perhaps not. In addition to the display of good manners that result, studies have been done that suggest that not only are the spirits and well-being of the recipient enhanced by these notes, but also those of the thankor, the one expressing thanks. Serious, legitimate academic research has been done, and the findings suggest that expressing gratitude may have very real emotional and interpersonal benefits for the person expressing the thanks. Physical and mental health improvements documented in one study after another. Now, from a purely practical and self-serving perspective, there is some information that you might find interesting. For example, approximately 10% of all recent college graduates seeking a job Writing thank you notes are not always primary importance to them, but recruiters are very clear and uniform in their view of this practice. All other things being equal, the student who writes a thank you note shoots to the top of the pile for hiring consideration. There are 10 qualified applicants for the position. One, let's hope it's you, writes a thank you note. Can you afford to pass up that edge? The second category are celebrities, but as I said, not fan mail in the traditional sense. Several things made these letters fun to write. The first was trying to track down an answer that I thought might have a chance of actually getting my letter into their hands. You can waste a lot of time online doing that, as my wife pointed out, and frankly, it was a lot easier to do that back then than it is today, but it was fun for me. The second interesting aspect of the celebrity thank yous was seeing who would respond, and if it appeared that it was the celebrity personally that answered. Of the celebrities, about a third got back in some way. Initially, I had planned to carefully record responses and develop some statistics about who responded, but that ended with letter 83, sent on September 11th, 2001. The events of that day and the subsequent anthrax scare had major impact on responses from celebrities. Drew Carey, the Cleveland comedian, for example, returned my letter unopened with a stamped message on the back of the envelope that said, "Mr. Carey accepts only email." Understandable. They didn't want to take a chance with what might be in that envelope or set up the expensive procedures that they would have to do to assure safety for people opening those letters. Many of the others, though, appeared to have been read and responded to by the celebrity personally. Mike Wallace, of course, clearly did. Jerry Orbach. Some of you knew him as a star of the TV series Law and Order. I knew him as a Broadway musical star. He created a lead role in a show called The Fantastics and did many other Broadway shows. Undoubtedly, he answered on his own because he made a reference to our common University of Illinois background that was just a bit too obscure to be the work of even a well-informed assistant. Leon Bibb, local newscaster, got back to me with 2 thank yous. Slightly different, but again, not the work of an assistant, the work of a very busy but thoughtful guy. I wrote Joan Baez, folk singer of the 60s. Our paths had crossed a couple of times. I've always been smitten by her, not necessarily her politics, but her voice and her beauty. I got back what was clearly a personal reply, not a doubt. Handwritten, home address on the envelope. But it was from her mother. I'm not kidding. I got a lovely letter from Joan Baez Sr. saying how much her daughter Joan had enjoyed my note. It's always been this way for me. Daughters, not that interested, but their moms seem to love me. Third category. These were people in the news, not celebrities, simply people who had done something that I found very impressive. The math teacher I already mentioned who taught his kids to play chess at a high level, or the band director of the Roma High School Mariachi Band. Roma High, a school of some 1,500 students just 300 yards from the Mexican border, is in Starr County, Texas, which regularly ranks at the top of national lists in terms of drug deals and poverty. Nonetheless, Yamil Yunus, the director, has created a mariachi band that has achieved national recognition, making membership in the band a greater status symbol at Roma High School than being on the football team. Now, anyone that knows me at all knows that I'm a sports fan, but how nice it is to acknowledge in the same way excellence in the arts. The joy of thank yous in this category was, one, in mailing the thank you, just mailing it, anticipating the delight that the recipient might feel on receiving a letter from someone with nothing but unqualified praise and recognition. No catch, no hook, no angle, nothing but good job from a total stranger. The second joy was the responses. a far higher percent responded to these letters than did the celebrities. I got a phone call at home from a young girl in that mariachi band who said, "We were so pleased to get a letter from Medina, Ohio. Our band director read it to us, and we looked it up, and we found Medina on the map. Thanks so much. And, oh, by the way, we have CDs for sale if you'd like one." Another example was a thank you I wrote to Randall Mused, a tenor in the Ohio Light Opera Company in Worcester one summer. In part I wrote, "I have seen Brigadoon numerous times, live and on TV. I have the original cast album from the Broadway production and a more recent CD, but never, never have I heard Come to Me, Bend to Me sung more beautifully than you did Sunday afternoon. It was breathtaking. My daughter was in tears." Every word of this is true, and his response was one of extraordinary gratitude and appreciation. People at this stage of their careers most often don't get much in the way of money to acknowledge their gifts. And I immodestly suspect that my note was on his bulletin board for quite some time. But it was the final category that was my favorite. Two types. First, letters to people I know, in recognition for something that may have happened years ago, where I either failed to thank them at the time, or more likely, I hadn't realized until much later how significant their contribution to my life was. But the moment had passed. It's too late to write now. There's no trigger. There's no specific reason to take up pen and paper and send a note now. Second, thank yous to people who are an ongoing part of my life, as sort of a lifetime achievement award, I guess, for 1,000,000 thoughtful acts and kindnesses, just for brightening my existence. But again, there's nothing specific to tie a letter to. There's simply no reason to write. And this, in reflection, was the single best reason for having undertaken the thank you note project. The project gave me a reason to write. Without it, there was none. Not now, anyway. Sure, I appreciated what they did, but there's nothing in particular that triggers that need today to acknowledge their kindness. I'll do it later, some other time, but maybe not. The project forced me to do it now. I had to produce a thank you every day. A good example is my note to Dick Allen, a pledge brother of mine at the University of Illinois. Dick was an indifferent business major, but extraordinarily active in campus functions. And he came back one summer after his sophomore year and announced he was switching his major from business to pre-med. Pre-med, sure. Why not switch to the most demanding and competitive major on campus when you're just kind of floating in your current major? And we all laughed and predicted a short stay in pre-med, but he did it. The happy ending is that today he's a retired orthopedic surgeon living in Peoria, Illinois. My most vivid memory of Dick at school was his getting back to the house at 9 or 9:30 in the evening from one of his many activities and studying until 3 or 4 in the morning, sometimes all night. In all the years I've been teaching, I've told the story of Dick Allen to my management classes as a real-life lesson in the importance of taking time to find your niche and the payoff from persistence and dedication if you know where you want to go and you know you have what it takes. I've told that story to hundreds of people, but never to Dick Allen. So I wrote it. Now, these letters aren't easy. Dick and I hadn't communicated in any way in nearly 50 years. No Christmas card exchange, no reunions, nothing. Will he even remember me? Will he assume I'm on my deathbed trying to get right with the world? Or that my next letter will be a request for just a few bucks to tie an old fraternity brother over? It's a bit tricky, but there were no problems. Dick's response was a 2.5-page letter summarizing his life and expressing an astonishing level of gratitude for learning of the impact that he had had on mine. Now, one might think that a person with this level of lifetime success wouldn't need affirmations of his contributions. Well, let's not kid ourselves. Everyone does. From the parking lot attendant to the chairman of the board, everyone needs to be told that they did a good job, that they're respected and admired. Let's not hold back passing along thanks where it's deserved just because someone seems to have everything and presumably don't need our praise. My last letter, number 365, was to Miss Alice Myers. Undoubtedly, as I look back, she was the reason for the project. A fifth grade teacher who had tremendous impact on me in several ways. Of course, I didn't realize it at the time. I was 11 and no deeper thinker then than I now am. But some years later, the significance of her role in my life became apparent. Still later, it occurred to me, I should thank her. And finally, many years later, I began a serious effort to locate her so that I could thank her. But you know how this story turns out. She'd been single, taught just 1 year at our school, no doubt married with a new name. As I say, you know how this story turns out. I waited too long. I simply couldn't find her. She may have died 60 years ago, or today be living on Front Street in Berea. I'll never know. So my last letter, number 365, was to her, addressed to Miss Alice Myers, Leo School, 312 West Oregon, Urbana, Illinois, with no return address, nothing in the letter to identify me. It simply could not be returned. In my overly romanticized mind, I envisioned somehow that she would get it, knowing, of course, that it was designed for the wastebasket. But that was enough, this symbolic act, to at least partially let me off the hook for failing to thank her when I could. And in a way, symbolically, to thank all the others that I missed. I had written in part, Dear Miss Myers, this is a thank you, even though I know it will not reach you. I've been unable to find you. I started too late. Were I able to reach you, I would tell you how influential you were in my life. And then I went on to say a few words about that. Thank you and all the wonderful teachers that never heard from their students. We didn't know until it was too late how much we would regret our failure to personally thank you. Well, that's kind of the summary of the project. Not all of my letters were to people. I even wrote Canada. But of the people I wrote 17 years ago, 70 are no longer living. Had I waited to now, 70 people would have never known how I felt about them, and that would have been tragic. There is simply no good reason to put off a deserved thank you. No Miss Myers regrets. But what about the impact of this project in retrospect? The single greatest joy to me in my 21 years of teaching was the knowledge that became increasingly clear that I just might have had a positive impact on at least a few of my students. And of course, I cherish any bit of evidence of that. Here's an example from a young woman that took a job in New York City immediately after graduation. I had been the baccalaureate speaker that year and based my remarks on the thank you note project. A few years after her graduation, she wrote from New York, Dear Professor Blair, you spoke at my baccalaureate service in 2008, and although you may not have realized it at the time, your words have made a wonderful impact on at least one life in a very big way. She then went on to briefly describe her situation and concluded by saying, thank you for sharing your inspirational story. You've changed my life. Wow. Talk about the power of thanks. Can you imagine how I felt when I received that letter? I was on a high for days, and just repeating it now moves me. Finally, a few questions I'm generally asked following this talk, and I've done it in a variety of ways in a variety of places. One is, did you get any bad reaction to your letters? Anyone that for some reason didn't like the letter, or felt you were intruding, or worried about your motives, or wondering how I got their address? The answer is no, and I was concerned about that. But no, at least not that I'm aware of. Someone, somewhere, may have gotten my thank you note and muttered, that SOB Blair, I never liked him, as he wadded it up and pitched it. But no evidence to me of that. Second, every time I've given this talk, someone has asked, well, what about your wife? Did you thank her? Well, first, she doesn't really fall in any of the categories, and I had no regrets. I thanked her every day, I really did. And if you knew her, you'd know why. But she also received letter number 1. She's gone now. She died last summer, and that's why I'm back here in Westlake. But yes, I thanked her every day, and I still do. And every day since she's been gone, it's become clearer why I should, and how much I regretted if I hadn't. Finally, the inevitable question, are you still writing a letter a day? And if not, why not? If it was such a rewarding experience. No, I'm not. It got to be a bit of a chore. Every day, no matter what else might be going on, or how I was feeling, or whether I was in town, or my computer crashed, and of course that did happen, I felt obliged to put a letter in the mail. And some days there just wasn't as much inspiration as others. I still write thank yous, a lot of them. And the Thank You Project did, and it still does, enable me to write thanks even when there's no immediate pressing need for it. Wrote one a couple of weeks ago, number 544. And if it hadn't been for the project, I might not have written it. I would have put it off, waiting, I guess, for a better time. But I must admit that feeling the need to produce a letter a day caused me to look at the world for positives, for good news, happy results. As I watched the evening news, mainly terrible, read the paper, mainly terrible, I was searching for positives, and that's good. When you focus in on the positives of the world, it has an overall positive effect on you, I'm sure of that. During my move from Medina, a mysterious box that once contained Timberlake boots surfaced with thanks scribbled on it with a magic marker. I opened it to find responses to my thank you notes. I had read them when I got them, of course, and saved them, but in a totally disorganized fashion. Then, not so long ago, thinking about this talk, on a gloomy Sunday afternoon, I sat down to reread them and relive my reaction to those replies. It was very interesting, very uplifting, and sometimes surprising. I had never looked at them all at once with so much time having passed. My first reaction was one of feeling really, really good. A warm, warm feeling. The gloom of the day quickly faded. Let me be candid and immodest. I was really proud of what I had done. The first surprise was how many of the grateful responses were from people that I no longer remembered. I had no idea what I had done to deserve my thank you, who they were or why I wrote. We just had this brief encounter where I told them how great they were, and then they told me how great I was, and how much they appreciated my note. Just a passing, fleeting moment in life that brought joy to strangers. That's not bad. Another pleasant surprise was the level of gratitude expressed. What a sweet and heartfelt note. I shall treasure it always. You made my day today with your note about, I appreciate your kind words more than you could ever know. Well, I know, because I knew her and I know why she was writing it. She worked with the biggest jerk that ever walked the face of the earth. She protected him every day. She did his work for him, and he never even thanked her. Well, I knew why she was so happy. One was addressed to Skinny. Me? Skinny? From a long-time friend. Received your very thoughtful, witty, insightful, cogent, inclusive, belated, appropriate thanks note. He goes on to say, my first thought was, this is years overdue. My second thought was, you must be terminal, because only terminally ill people bear their souls like this. This is a lifetime friend expressing in his response the concerns I had about writing when expressing a lifetime of thanks. People wonder, what's wrong? Why should you have to be on your deathbed to write a letter with sincere thanks? And this one caught my eye. Beautifully embossed stationery with a letterhead that started off 10 Downing Street. And the letter goes on, very brief. The Prime Minister has asked me to thank you for your recent letter. Sincerely, Jacqueline Fairweather. Does that sound like a James Bond girlfriend name? It does to me. I wonder what she's doing today. Reviewing the responses confirmed my thought that whatever level you achieve in life, you still want to be appreciated. One, a superstar early boss of mine at Standard Oil, had gone on to national prominence, remarkable success in several different areas, and was a zillionaire many times over. He wrote, Dear Glenn, it was great to hear from you, and I appreciate your words more than I can say. And ended, thank you for writing. It buoyed my spirits even though it was a little humbling. Does that sound like someone who's had so much success in life that affirmations of his contributions and positive comments weren't necessary? Again, Everyone at every level wants to be valued and appreciated. I said earlier that there were no negative responses, and that's true as best I know, but at least 3 disappointed me greatly. Their response to my note was to have an assistant send a form letter saying, "Mr. Big Shot asked me to thank you," along with, can you guess what was enclosed? A thick packet of materials encouraging me to send a financial contribution. I wrote back, "You can keep your solicitation materials and I'm withdrawing my original thank you." Now, of course, I didn't do that, but that's what I was thinking, and worse. I came across 2 that gave me pause and reminded me how things change. People aren't always who they seem to be, and it caused me to reflect, as many others have on this issue. Does the immense good someone once did offset to some degree the negatives that later surface? Well, I'm not smart enough to know the answer to that, but I suppose it varies case by case. But as I say, when I came across my thank yous to Bill Cosby and Joe Paterno, when they were arguably 2 of the most admired men in the country, I just had to wonder. Final big surprise to me, very positive when I reviewed the notes. I won't name names, but in 4 cases, my initial thank you note to someone I didn't really know resulted in a personal friendship that still exists today. I can only tell you that my life would have been significantly diminished if these 4 people weren't part of it. All of it from a simple thank you note. Well, that's it, my thank you project. But it's not exactly it. That's how it ended when I agreed to do this talk. But then something happened. In August, Philip Morris, a plain dealer writer, wrote a column about my project, and he made me look far, far better than I am. It was in the Sunday edition, and on Wednesday I was overwhelmed with an avalanche of positive comments, praise, promises of notes that they were going to write, sent from people from every aspect of my life, as well as strangers. And the Wednesday they arrived, well, that Wednesday was the exact 1-year anniversary of my wife's death. What started June 21st, 2001, had come back to lift my spirits and brighten what would otherwise have been a very dark day for me. The project has taken on a life of its own, and it will certainly outlive me. Now for my final thought. Let's vow now that we never have a Miss Myers regret like I did. Most of us, I'm sure, have heard the quote by Stephen Grellet, a Quaker missionary, "I shall pass through this world at once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." It's kind of a classy, poetic version of my Miss Myers regret thought. Let's commit to writing as many thank yous as we need to avoid that horrible experience, realizing when it's now too late that you owed someone an expression of gratitude. It's not a good feeling. If I were back at BW now, at this point in my lecture, I'd say, "Okay, wake up, put down your phones, you quit mooning over that girl in the front row, she is so out of your league, and get out a pencil and think about who would be the person that you will write when you get home to avoid a Miss Myers regrets." Probably won't be a spouse or child or parent. I assume there's many opportunities ongoing, so no regrets there. But someone who, if you no longer had an opportunity to thank them, you'd regret that failure forever. Your personal Miss Myers regret. I'll give you 10 seconds to think who it might be. There you have it, 10 seconds. I hope someone came to mind. I hope you write them. I hope it turns out well. A couple of suggestions about the format might be helpful. Mine were typed on a half sheet of paper. My handwriting's illegible. I can think better, draft, redraft, etc. on a computer. But the key, no matter what you do, keep it short and don't worry about length, format, or anything that will discourage you from writing. Keep it simple and easy. Just a few sentences. A quick, simple note that gets sent is so much better than a brilliant masterpiece sitting on your desk, revised over and over until it's too late to send. I can't conclude a thank you talk without some thanks. Thank you for being an attentive audience, laughing at or at least putting up with my attempts at humor. Aaron Manning and the Porter Library staff for giving me this opportunity, and for Westlake and welcoming me back so warmly after so many years. And of course, them. I see we have a little more time. Any questions?